The air was thick with the scent of incense, the kind that clung to your clothes long after you left the church. The stained glass windows cast fractured rainbows across the wooden pews, and the silence was so profound it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Olivia had always found solace in the quiet of St. Michael's, but tonight, it felt different. Tonight, the stillness felt like a prelude to something she couldn't name. She knelt in the front pew, her fingers gripping the edge of the bench, her heart pounding in her chest. She had come to confess, but not to God. Not yet. First, she needed to tell him. Father Elias. She had known this moment would come. She had felt it building like a storm, slow and inevitable. But now, as she heard the soft creak of the sacristy door opening, she wondered if she had the strength to say the words. To admit what they had done. To admit that she had fallen in love with a man who could never truly be hers. The footsteps echoed in the empty church, growing closer. Olivia closed her eyes, her breath catching in her throat. When she opened them, he was there, standing in the aisle, his dark robes blending into the shadows. His face was pale, his eyes searching hers with a mixture of fear and longing. "Olivia," he said, his voice low and trembling. "What are you doing here?" She stood, her legs unsteady beneath her. "I had to see you," she whispered. "Before it's too late." Olivia had been just 19 when she first met Father Elias. She had grown up in the small town of Willowbrook, where life moved at a snail's pace and everyone knew everyone else's business. The church had always been a constant in her life, a place of comfort and routine. But when Father Elias arrived, everything changed. He was younger than the other priests she had known, with sharp cheekbones and a voice that carried a quiet authority. There was something about him that drew people in, something magnetic. Olivia had noticed it the first time she saw him at the altar, his hands raised in blessing, his eyes scanning the congregation. When their gazes met, she had looked away quickly, her cheeks burning. She told herself it was nothing. But deep down, she knew it was more. Her mother had been the one to suggest she volunteer at the church. "It'll be good for you," she had said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Father Elias is doing wonderful things for the parish. You should be a part of it." Reluctantly, Olivia agreed. She wasn't particularly devout, but she believed in the rituals, in the quiet solace the church offered. Serving at the altar seemed like a way to prove herself, to show she could be more than the restless girl people whispered about. The first few weeks were a blur of rehearsals and nervous mistakes. Father Elias was patient but firm, his corrections delivered in a tone that left no room for argument. "You're doing well, Olivia," he said one evening after a particularly long practice. His voice was kind, but there was something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. As the weeks turned into months, Olivia found herself spending more and more time at the church. She stayed late after Mass to help clean, finding comfort in the quietness of the empty pews and the faint scent of incense that lingered in the air. Father Elias was often there too, his presence a quiet reassurance. Their conversations started small, the weather, upcoming feast days, the state of the parish. But slowly, they deepened. He asked about her family, her dreams, her fears. "You're different from the others," he said one evening, his voice soft. "You question things. That's rare in someone so young." Olivia clung to those words, replaying them in her mind long after she had gone home. She told herself it was just a compliment, nothing more. But the way he looked at her, the way his eyes seemed to linger a second too long, made her wonder. The turning point came on a quiet Tuesday evening. The church was empty, the only sounds the faint creak of the wooden floorboards and the distant hum of the heater. Olivia was organizing the vestments when she felt his presence behind her. "Need any help?" he asked, his voice low. She turned, startled. "Oh, no. I'm fine." But he didn't leave. Instead, he stepped closer, his gaze steady, his expression unreadable. "You're always here," he said, almost to himself. "Always working. Always searching." Olivia didn't know what to say. His words felt like a mirror held up to her soul, exposing things she hadn't even realized about herself. "I guess I just like being here," she managed to say. "It's more than that," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're looking for something, Olivia, aren't you?" She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Her heart was pounding, her hands trembling. And then, without thinking, she took a step back. "I should go," she said, her voice shaky. "Yes," he replied. But he didn't move. His eyes lingered on hers, filled with something she couldn't name. Something that terrified and thrilled her all at once. That night, Olivia lay awake, her thoughts racing. What was she looking for? And why did it feel like she was finding it in him? It started with a kiss, hesitant and almost accidental, but enough to ignite something neither of them could control. They were standing in the middle of the sanctuary, the very place where Father Elias preached about virtue and restraint every Sunday. And yet, in that moment, none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was him, the way he made her feel, the way he looked at her like she was the only thing that existed. When it was over, they both stood there in stunned silence, the weight of what they had done pressing down on them like a physical force. "This can't happen again," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "I know," Olivia replied, though part of her didn't believe it. But as she walked home that night, a strange mix of guilt and exhilaration coursing through her, she realized that she didn't want it to be the end. Over the next few weeks, they tried to pretend nothing had changed. They kept their conversations polite, their interactions professional. But the tension between them was impossible to ignore. Every glance, every accidental touch felt like a spark waiting to ignite. And then, one night, it did. Their meetings became more frequent, more reckless. They met late at night, in the sacristy, in the back pews, anywhere they could find a moment alone. The guilt was always there, lurking in the shadows, but it was overshadowed by the intensity of their connection. But secrets have a way of coming to light. Olivia's world came crashing down when she discovered she was pregnant. The news hit her like a punch to the gut. She didn't know what to do, who to turn to. When she finally told Father Elias, his reaction was exactly what she feared. "We can't keep it," he said, his voice heavy with desperation. "If anyone finds out." Olivia felt a surge of anger. "What about me?" she demanded. "What about what I want?" But deep down, she knew he was right. They couldn't keep the baby. It would ruin them both. The days that followed were a blur of pain and regret. Olivia made the appointment in secret, telling her family she was visiting a friend in the next town over. Father Elias drove her to the clinic, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. "I'll be here when it's over," he said as they pulled into the parking lot. Olivia nodded, too numb to respond. The procedure itself was quick, but the aftermath was anything but. Olivia felt hollow, like a part of her had been ripped away. Father Elias tried to comfort her, but his words felt empty, his presence a reminder of everything they had lost. After that, things were never the same. The guilt was too much, the secrecy too suffocating. Olivia started avoiding him, finding excuses to stay away from the church. He tried to reach out, but she couldn't face him. Not after what they had done. Eventually, Olivia made the decision to leave. She packed her things and moved to another town, far away from the memories and the pain. She thought leaving would make it easier, but the truth was, some scars never heal. Months later, Olivia found herself sitting in a small cafe, staring out the window at the rain-soaked streets. She had started to rebuild her life, but the past still haunted her. And then, one day, he walked through the door. Father Elias. Her heart stopped as she looked up and saw him standing there, like a ghost from her past. "Olivia," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "I had to see you." They talked for hours, their conversation a mix of anger, regret, and something softer, something that felt like forgiveness. When he left that night, Olivia felt a strange sense of closure. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was an ending. And sometimes, that's enough. Olivia doesn't go to church anymore, but sometimes she still finds herself lighting a candle in an empty chapel, saying a quiet prayer for the life she left behind. She doesn't know where Father Elias is now, and she doesn't want to know. Their story ended in that cafe, and that's where it belongs. Some scars never fade, but they don't have to define you. They're just reminders of where you've been, and proof that you survived.